It's one of those watches that absolutely no one should want, but through a strange set of circumstances that prove after all that humans are a bit dim, it is also one of the most desirable watches out there. It's the M.A.D 1, a topsy-turvy brain aneurysm of a watch that's about as sensible as eating bricks. It's completely mental, so I got one. Was it worth it? For almost as long as I've been into watches, I've been a fan of Maximilian Bucer. He's like watch industry Jesus, bringing light and life to those he meets, although thankfully we're yet to nail him to anything. From his early days reviving the Harry Winston watch brand, he's made it his mission to shine a light on talented watchmakers who otherwise could have disappeared into obscurity. You may have heard of some, like Kari Voutilainen and Francois-Paul Journe, for example. That was the Opus series, one of the most bananas collections of watches I've ever seen. But for Max, who himself seems to be a few bananas short of a tree, it wasn't enough. And so he, with his friends, created Max Bucer and Friends, mb&f, to take watchmaking to the same place Salvador Dali spent his long weekends, Cuckoo Town. From the horological machines to my personal favourite, the legacy machines, mb&f showed us how to follow the White Rabbit in a way that I am completely unable to accommodate. Like a dog with a golf club, I can look on wistfully, but I'll never be able to take a swing. Rather than lacking opposable thumbs, however, my main deficit, as with many others, is the sheer amount of wonga required to participate. It's something that Max was acutely aware of, and so in 2021, to reward those closest to the brand who supported it during its challenging growth, he created the M.A.D Edition's M.A.D 1. It was blue, not for public sale, and it was as bonkers as a sack of salamanders. Word of this piece got out, and before too long, demand for a series piece grew. And so came the M.A.D 1 Red, an almost identical re-edition of the original with a couple of small changes and in a deep blood red. It was launched with a raffle system, which has since done 2 rounds, with a third for a new green edition and a fourth for a special collaboration with artist JCDC, whose name in French isn't even worth me attempting to pronounce without this turning into a Monty Python sketch. There was even a Lucky Clover version of the green edition for those who'd lost on every single raffle, cementing the ethos upon which this watch was created, as a love letter to the community that had supported Max's endeavours every step of the way, even if they couldn't afford them. One of those people was me. Max was the first person from the watch industry to give me an interview, and he even invited me to Switzerland to see his work in person. When I met him again, around a decade later, he remembered me, my name, and that interview, as though it was just yesterday. So naturally, I had to have a M.A.D 1. Let's take a closer look. As with any Max Bucer piece, the M.A.D 1 wears its shoes on its hands and its gloves on its feet. It's not so much an oddball as it is a stark raving loony ball, and that's made immediately apparent by the complete lack of time telling from the front. Instead, you're presented with the Caliber, a Japanese Miyota whose massively oversized rotor weight dominates the view. It's a familiar sight for fans of mb&f, whose watches have used a twin-bladed rotor weight across many of the models. It's inspired by some kind of Japanese cartoon robot, something that's so boring to me I can't even be bothered to look up, but sat in place of the dial, it looks like it would get you stopped at airport security. Beneath it, the setup of the upside-down Caliber does a great job of disguising its small size, and generally tidying it up for the primetime viewing slot up front. Miyota Calibers tend to be pretty well finished anyway, and with the grey decorative plate screwed on to fill the Caliber's stepped recess, and the bright red spacer around the outer edge, it feels nicely complete, rather than looking like a half-finished Airfix kit. More innards are revealed with the crown stem bridging the gap between crown and Caliber, which has been sent up to 12 o'clock to keep it out of the way. From there, things only get more ridiculous, so hold on to your hats. Being 42mm across already makes the M.A.D 1 chunkier than a corgi's butt, however it's the 18.8mm thickness that's really got this thing riding high. Cuffs, leave them at home. They're as welcome here as a platypus at Darwin's house. The reason the M.A.D 1 is at the Kardashian end of the thickness scale is to accommodate the bit a watch is actually for, time telling. Simply having 2 hands would just be too boring, so instead the M.A.D 1 utilises a pair of rings instead, which get read from the side in line with a little pointer. Because the movement is upside down, they read counterintuitively to the way you'd expect, from right to left instead of left to right. The whole thing sits in a steel cradle that, when viewed from the top, looks like a tortoise, which is why on the crown there's a little tortoise engraved. If you think that's fun, however, you ain't seen nothing yet. The way the time display works is actually delightfully simple. Instead of putting hands on the pinions that deliver hours and minutes, the black and red rings are pressed on instead. On the inside, they're connected to the center with a bunch of spokes, kind of like a bicycle wheel, which you can just about see moving imperceptibly through the caseback. It's because the advancement of the hours and minutes is so slow that they get relegated to the side in favor of the rotor weight, which spins freely up front. Not only does the rotor act to keep the 42-hour power reserve topped up, in time-honoured tradition, it brings kids' trends to balding men in their late 30s way too late. In this case, the fidget spinner. Give the watch a shake and the rotor will do one of two things. It will either limply muster a few measly rotations, or it will go absolutely crazy and spin like a neutron star in a washing machine. The latter isn't always a guarantee, and so when you get the spin just right, it's a rewarding experience. Not like raising a child or getting a degree, but probably not as far off as it should be. And it's cheaper than both those things, starting at $3,600. As if it couldn't get any madder. For its final mescaline-fueled act, the M.A.D. gets a healthy dose of photoluminescent goodness on the rings, the pointer they're read from, and of course the rotor weight itself. As my old scout leader used to say, the fun doesn't have to stop when the lights go out. Despite being the size of an armoured vehicle, the watch itself is surprisingly unobtrusive to wear. Given most of the case is hollow, it doesn't weigh anywhere near as much as you'd think, and the wide stance hunkers down so it doesn't feel top heavy. The only oddity is the rotor weight itself, which can be felt wibbling the watch around when it's spinning. The M.A.D. comes on a thick black textured strap with speed holes and red stitching, and is plenty comfortable if a little slow to break in. The double deployant clasp is reassuringly robust and is branded with the M.A.D. logo. For those who like to switch straps up, the 24mm wide curved spring bar makes it a challenge. However, channel partner Deluxe have a selection of cut-to-size rubber straps specifically for the M.A.D. that come in red, blue, green, orange, black, and white. The straps get a 3D mosaic style texture and have even been given the nod by Max Buser himself. Fitting them is very simple, with the rubber strap physically cut to the size of your wrist. Instructions are included, and if an idiot like me can do it, anyone can. It's easy to trim down section by section if you want to, checking the size each time to make sure it fits. The clasp is the Deluxe leaf spring clasp, which snaps in place with a similar satisfaction to the M.A.D. rotor's spin, and includes a micro adjust setting on both sides for fine adjustment too. The straps are even quick release, so swapping between them is a doddle. Check the description for links to these straps, plus other Alcantara options for the M.A.D. as well, and thank you to Deluxe for supporting the channel. So for your $3,600, what else possibly is there that embodies the same drywall chomping madness as the M.A.D. Well, if you'd asked me that at the launch in 2021, I wouldn't have had much of an answer, because like mb&f before it, the M.A.D. has really broken new ground for everyone else. Today, however, there are watches like the Colloquium Project 01 with its cast case and pimply dial, the Barrel Hand with its 3D printed structure, and the Space One Tellurium, which brings the movement of the Earth, Moon, and Sun to the wrist. In fairness, the Xeric inverter did exist before the M.A.D., but I believe the M.A.D. massively polished up the concept to make it appealing to a much wider audience. And it's inspired smaller creators like Radcliffe to bring even more affordable options to market too. Really, the M.A.D. has no competition because it's as much about the people as it is the product, a direct connection to the mind that keeps bringing fresh, exciting new approaches to what could otherwise be a very stuffy industry. The M.A.D. isn't all water into wine, however. As I said, it's not a small watch, and you will feel self-conscious wearing it in front of people who don't have the time or inclination to hear why you're dressed as a space ninja. Also, setting the time isn't the smoothest, since the scale of the rings is much larger than the hands that would ordinarily be in use. There are no seconds to worry about, but even setting the minutes correctly can be a little bit of a fiddle. The standard strap is very thick and can get, if you're a sweater like me, a little clammy, and no matter how hard I try, the clasp always pinches on first contact. A little shuffle and it's fine, but I just can't seem to avoid that initial nip. And lastly, pricing has moved on a surprising amount these days. At $3,600, it isn't the value for money miracle it was a few years ago. It's still enormously well priced for a product attached to Max Busa, but it's no longer alone in the field of budget hierology. And that leaves the positives, which are utterly plentiful. It looks fantastic, the quality feels strong, and of course it's more fun than a foam party on the International Space Station. Spinning the rotor just does not seem to get old. Granted, you won't be wearing this watch every single day, but I can guarantee that every time you reach for it, you'll have already executed a few sweet spins before you've even put it on your wrist. Perhaps one I missed from the negatives actually. It's surprisingly easy to get a sore elbow from jerking it too much. Ask me how I know. And of course, the most positive aspect is getting to enjoy a flavour of the Horological and Legacy Machine series, watches that I think are some of the most important in contemporary watchmaking. One day I very much hope to own my dream watch, the LM101, but until then, I'm very glad there's this instead. That's my take on the M.A.D 1. Tell me yours in the comments below. And thank you so much to strap partner Deluxe for supporting the channel. Search Deluxe or click the link in the description to find out more. Thanks also goes to my incredible Patreons, who you can join via the link in the description too. And M.A.D 1 owners, remember, if you've got a sore elbow from jerking it too much, you can always swap to the other arm. See you next time.